And we are back, and we have got a great deep dive for you guys today. With everything going on with Blizzard, it's easy to see video games as a toxic, male-dominated industry. And for much of its history, I'd say that's honestly kind of true. However, due to the rise of cultural due to the rise of the casual gamer simulators and genuine interest in competitive games in general, the demographics have shifted substantially. In fact, adult women make up the largest demographic in gaming. The misogynistic and capitalistic video game industry has reached a critical point, and we are getting into a place where the friction is starting to show. Gamergate was a huge maker for a lot of Gamergate was a huge game changer for a lot of people in the industry, where the hostility towards female developers was truly showcased. To this day, there is still fights about what the purpose of Gamergate was, and honestly, it's kind of gross that there still are fights about it. To be quite frank, we've done a couple videos on it before on TikTok, and we've talked about it before here on the show. But I can tell you this much: I can draw a straight line, and I wanted to do this on the show. I can draw a straight line from Gamergate to QAnon. And of course, you could draw from QAnon, you could draw straight lines from everywhere else. And Gamergate was actually the breaking point for 4chan. Okay. So 4chan, 4chan was the bastion of free speech. You could post anything you wanted there until the Gamergate controversy got banned on other social media platforms, and it all came over to 4chan, and it created such a toxic fucking environment and all this kind of hostility that 4chan issued its first ever ban and banned conversations based on Gamergate. And that's when people went wild. They made 8chan, and 8chan was always like no censorship anywhere at all. They had bad problems with like anything you think of that like if you said that, hey, this is an internet free for all, okay, well then they put like fucking child pornography and murders and all this kind of shit on there, and solicitations and all that kind of stuff. And so they had to deal with that, but that became the environment for 8chan, and 8chan of course became the environment for QAnon to grow. So like again, straight line from Gamergate to QAnon. And QAnon, you can draw a straight line from there to the insurrection. And so you can draw literally a straight line from Gamergate to the insurrection at the fucking Capitol.
Low key,
so yeah, the gaming community has had enough. And tonight we're going to talk about some of the common struggles. Before we get too far, though, I talked a little bit about Gamergate here, but Sax, can you kind of explain to the audience what Gamergate is?
Gamergate is basically an online harassment campaign that started with a hashtag use of a hashtag Gamergate, and that's centered around sexism and anti-progressivism in video game culture. There's been a lot of stuff that happened with that, starting back in 2014 with a indie game developer. I believe her name is Zoe Quinn, and she had developed a game called Depression Quest, and it dealt with experiencing depression, and going through different scenarios, not your typical run of the mill run and gun type of video game situation, kind of like taking some of the things from her life. And then there were so many people that got on and just completely trashed and disrespected her, like concerning the game, all the way up to death threats, rape threats, and all of that. And that's not a good look at all, and unnecessary. And this is, how Gamergate came to be, and how it got its name was it was solidified by actor. I believe his name Adam. Goodness gracious, I'm trying to. I think I just saw it earlier. Here we go. Adam Baldwin. He was the one who coined the phrase Gamergate. For it all, and it's pretty disgusting.
One of the big things I remember about it being really bad was after the whole like reviews for the game came out, Zoe's ex-boyfriend came out with this big report and said like, oh, Zoe slept with me to get this good review and all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And he recanted that entire thing later on in court when pressed about it, right? But that didn't stop everybody else. And that's what I think was the the kind of what Gamergate coagulated around, where they thought it was a conspiracy, was they believed that at first, that what happened was the reason that Depression Quest got so many good reviews was because that these female developers were sleeping with the staff to push their SJW agendas on all these, to gamer culture. And that's where the controversy brew of. and it's you can obviously see how that the toxic place to brew a controversy from, right? Just kind of criticizing culture that is critical of a lot of the toxicity that we've been talking about, throughout the show.
Right.
But I don't know, Kev, how would you sum up what we've learned from Gamergate?
That there's a lot of sad, bitter, disgusting people out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just shines a light on what we were talking about earlier, that, this industry still isn't a safe space for women, for, people of color, people who anybody who's not, heterosexual, like this, like there's still a lot of muck that, lies, I guess, within the cracks of this, this, for lack of a better word, tarnished industry. And I think Gamergate was really sort of the first real mainstream media story that brought all this to light. It had been known, and that's why, a lot of people, women in particularly, at least who I've talked to, that like never really were, got involved in like video games or played them, is because, it wasn't welcoming. It was very toxic and sexist. I mean, think about it. Like, if you got into a game and God forbid somebody found out that one of the people playing was a woman, she was getting all types of harassment from just, it's like, and I kind of get it being, I mean, I don't want to say I get it, but, like being black, like if someone finds out you're black, you're getting all types of racial expletives thrown at you. And so I think this just really, I think this was something that, that a lot of us kind of knew, I guess, in the back of our minds, but when it really like when they started sort of coming together and calling themselves Gamergaters and all this stupid shit, it really gets kind of scary, because you're like, one, you don't know who these people are, but they do have some type of influence, and I mean influence in a way of like creating an arena environment that isn't safe for people like Zoe and Brianna Wu and people who were directly affected by Gamergate.
Right.
Yeah. No, and I think that, like Zoe came out after all that stuff happened. It really kind of addressed the public, and like it kind of like made like what I would describe as like kind of like the manifesto of like the sexual toxicity of the gamer culture. And the thing that's just so disappointing about Gamergate is, to me, it seemed like Zoe was trying to start a movement and trying to be like, hey, we can learn from this whole situation here and maybe try to make it better. But the gamer community said, fuck you, no, we won't. And like, it was kind of like a failed movement in a way, is how I look at it. And so that's what's kind of stings about Gamergate, is it's because it's kind of like when we tried to make progress and lost. And so that's the part that, to me, when it comes back up, it's like, it's the same feeling that you see with like the military industrial people that are like, oh, America's the greatest, we're the greatest country in the world, we spend so much money on our defense. And like, well, what about Vietnam? Like, oh, that's different. They lose all their whole situation when you kind of point out one crucial flaw, kind of thing. And Gamergate in assess is pointing out the Vietnam part, I guess. It's pointing out when, like, it points out that progress, it really drives the nail home. I guess there's plenty of things that do, but it drives the nail home that progress isn't a continually trajectory upward, right? It falls, it goes backwards, plenty. And you have to pull it back up, and you have to see if you can pull it back up higher than it was the first time. But sometimes you might not even get there. Like, I feel like Gamergate was one of the things that cost us G4, because when that happened was right when G4 was going out too. And a lot of those people that were being targeted on there, because they spread from, we're not just doing this to Zoe, Aisha Tyler. Remember Aisha Tyler? She was all over everything. She was all over G4. She was a big nerd. She was targeted in Gamergate big time. And like she does her own thing now, and she does different stuff, but it's not what she used to do. and I don't blame her. You know,
Yeah.
I don't blame her one bit.
Yeah, 100%.
No, go in any any like I guess woman in gaming's like comments on Twitter or Instagram, and it's fucking vile. You
Yeah.
know, like just like and I get it. It's like, and that's something that like I'll like none of us here will ever understand, right? Because like
Right.
we're dudes. We don't worry. I don't. At least me. This is just me speaking for I guess most guys, but I don't walk around the streets at night worried about someone raping me. Like that's just not a thought that
Right.
ever crosses my mind.
Right.
So like I can't even like fathom what that must be like to get that sort of vitriol on a daily basis just for existing
Yeah.
and having a voice for your passion. You know, like it's fucking crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when people can hide behind digital avatars, they'll say whatever the fuck they want.
Obviously.
Right. And you don't know how many are benign or how many are like
Yeah.
if someone really had the opportunity to take action on those words, like you can't take that risk.
I mean,
Oh,
honestly, after January 6th, like it's even more so.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we've
Oh, yeah.
seen
All day.
that like there can like it used to be where you could brush crazy bullshit off on the internet, but
Yep.
at one point this fucking year, crazy bullshit on the internet manifested itself into a real fucking thing.
Yeah.
You know, and and I know I'm the one talking about it. Y'all the one that fucking live in DC. Y'all are there for all that craziness.
Yeah.
You know, like so to me, it's even more consequential now. You know, little as Nelly's and there was like, yeah, I'm glad. That's why I'm glad Unite doesn't have in-game voice chat. We got voice chat when you're here with the nerd herd, but if there's anybody in the nerd herd that's being a racist or a homophobe or a fucking misogynist or whatever, you talk to one of us and we'll boot them the fuck out of there. We don't have that privilege on the internet, you know?
Right. And
on
these
the worldwide internet.
These people that were active in Gamergate they were actually pretty malicious too. And I was saying not just the threats, you know what I'm saying, just the chatter. People were getting dedoxed. You know, people were getting their email, their personal living addresses exposed online.
Yeah.
Like people had to flee their homes because of that. You know what I mean? So yeah, man, like how you said earlier, it is a direct line from Gamergate to QAnon for sure. And directly how what happened on January 6th happened.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And
like
so,
that's
like,
exactly.
And so when people like brush off stuff like this as something small, we brushed this off in 2013. And we brushed it off even up until like I remember when we were talking about it even on this show and we were talking about it like a kind of a historical kind of thing. And that was before the insurrection, you know, like before those things led up. And it was still brushed off as something semi-insignificant. But there's a pattern here. You know, and as we said before, progression is not always an upward trajectory. It pings back. Well, this is one of the times where it pinged back, and like we didn't realize how far it pinged back. You know, and that's what's scary to me about Gamergate is we didn't realize how far back it went. You know, people claim that Gamergate was about video games pushing a feminist SJW who want to ruin video games. And that they are pushing the reporters out of the industry. And that by pushing reporters out of the industry, that they won, but this problem still persists today. Are Gamergate stands so entrenched in gamer culture that they can't be removed? Stan, or Zach? Stands. I called you Stan.
Stan. American Dad. It's. I'm going to say it like this. As long as POS people, you know, exist, and which a lot did and do in Gamergate, unfortunately, it's going to remain. And like, that's just, unfortunately, the nature of the beast. It's what, the better thing is, how can we better deal with that? Especially now that we know, like, it can be real. Like can really cause some physical damage, some actual trauma, like in a way that's dangerous, like showing up somewhere and I don't know, getting into a place that honestly is the second most secure place in the country. It should have been able to do so. You know what I mean? So it's like it's kind of ridiculous. But as far as, can they be removed? Like, the optimist in me wants to say, of course they can be, with enough hoorah for sure. But the realist in me is like, there's always people out here that are going to be extra and really, really, really strong in their convictions for what they believe is right, even though if what they believe is right is very, very harmful to other people. And they don't care that it's harmful to other people. So I unfortunately have to say, no, I hate that.
And I think that that's an honest answer because, like, saying yes, they can easily be removed makes it sound like it's something that's very easy to do or casual, but this is deep. This is deep, deep, deep now. And, I think, what it makes me think of is the other day at one of my VODs, you can totally check it out. I don't want to call anybody out, but there was people in my chat were playing Unite, and someone was just saying the R word and in reference to mentally handicapped people, and I was like, hey, but we don't use that word. Like, cannot use that word on stream. And I had to like actually like correct them like vocally and say like, hey, can you not say that? And it's something that like that word is used commonly, and 9 times out of 10, if I say to somebody, I'll message them, DM them privately, like, hey, can you not use that word? They get it, right? Doesn't happen again. But this person was like being persistent and still like, well, I was, because you're streaming. Oh, because, but that word's allowed on stream. I was like, hey, man, I just don't want you using that word around me. And I think sometimes it takes that confrontational aspect where you have to address it head on, where it's there, and not be comfortable with even some of the little things out there, and you have to draw some definitive lines. Is that using that a big, huge deal? Probably not, but I mean, it still is to, disabled people. If you're not considering all people, then you're not considering all people, and so I don't know, that just stuff like that makes me think of that. And again, that is something that I felt like is particularly that word is something that is a part of that culture, is that part of that toxicity that people just don't care. Oh, you suck, it's just toxic shit. Like they lose in a game and the first thing they want to throw out is pejoratives, whether they be homophobic or racist or sexist. I mean, all of those. I know all of the sexist, homophobic, and misogynist pejoratives from Xbox Live lobbies. Like all of them,
Yeah.
And so like I have to agree, Zach. I think it is pretty deeply entrenched, and the only way you can do it is by addressing it face forward. But I don't know if even addressing it face forward our entire lifespan is going to really get rid of it.
Right.
Yeah, no, it definitely just takes time, right? Like it's just one of those things where like you just have to be candid about, why something's wrong. And a lot of times, like you said, there's just at the end of the day, there's gonna be people who are just they don't have any empathy, right? Like that's why like it takes someone unempathetic to send someone death and rape threats. Like that's just at the end, like that's a broken person.
Right.
Like at the end of the, like that's a broken person. And they're able to do that because they're able to do it under the guise of the internet because it allows that. It allows that space for it. There's no punishment. There are no consequences for it. They can do it anonymously. And and I think the only way you really combat it is you just go the opposite direction. What do they want? They want things to be white, cis, and male.
Yeah.
So you do the opposite. You go progressive and you go as much you give them as much representation as you possibly can till you just drown them out.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately that's the only way you combat that. You can't correct them, right? Like you can't correct them by saying, "Hey, this is wrong." No, you just put enough people around them that they hate, or let me phrase that. They hate themselves ultimately, right? Like this is deep rooted, so that's it's projection onto other people that they feel is like making them insecure, whatever the fuck. So ultimately what you do is you give them what they don't want. So it's like, oh well, why, like, for instance, when everyone was complaining about that Battlefield, I think it was like Battlefield 1, there was a female soldier or something, everyone was like, oh well, that's not historically accurate. And then, you know, I think Battlefield fired back like, it's a video game, dumbass. Like, you know, like
Right.
the way you combat that is with, you know, with progress. You just say, no, we're not going to tolerate your intolerance. You know,
Yeah.
we're going to give give the right people a voice.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that you know, the thing about it is that the push on the Gamergate end ends up creating games where you're trying to, like, you know, as you're saying, flood the market with as much diversity, as much inclusion as you possibly can, right? And so you end up creating, you know, games that are extra queer, extra you know, diverse, extra you know, feminist, and it's literally the fucking Gamergate's worst nightmare. Like, it's literally that is, it's like, fine, if you're worried about us pushing an SJW agenda, here's us, you know, pushing an SJW agenda. If we're gonna get in trouble
Right.
for it, might as well swinging, right? You know.
Right.
Right.
I think that's interesting. That's kind of been the counter product of it, because I have seen games like that that
Yeah.
are, you know, really focused on those things, and I love that. I do think
Right.
that it's very much needed. And when you go into those games, you get a breath of fresh air from those games, even if the mechanics are the same, even if it's just another platformer, even if it's just whatever,
Right.
because of the how much it's separated from the typical um, games you played before.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
No, exactly. And I think that's ultimately how you do it, right? Like, you don't do what Ubisoft did with Assassin's Creed. You you know,
Mhm.
you do the opposite. You make a female protagonist. It fucking works. Laura Croft was in the 90s. I mean,
Yeah.
Correct.
you know, and she's still super popular today. So it's
Hmm.
not, you know, Sam, it's like, you go down the list, the shit works. I think it's just this lazy, it's a mix of everything from just this lazy monetary safe approach of, well, we want to appeal to the majority because that's where most of the money is. And I think, one, that's irresponsible, and two, that's just not even true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sexual harassment isn't the only concern and cause for activism within the video game industry. One other big point that comes to mind for me is crunch, right? We've been talking about crunch in the past couple of years. For those of who don't know, Kev, can you kind of break down what crunch is?
Yeah, crunch is basically, yeah, so I'm supposed to contractually work 40 hours a week, and somehow you squeeze 80 to 100 hours a week out of me in order to, you know, meet some unrealistic deadline that you set for, you know, yourself and your stakeholders. And I, the worker, the person who's doing the execution of said whatever deadline this IP is for, had no say in it.
Yeah. And essentially, the decision's getting worse and worse, or tighter and tighter, and the deadlines are getting tighter and tighter, and the pressure is getting put on
Right.
the most on you because you're the fulcrum of that decision, and you're the one that can't push it down the line any further.
Right, right.
That's my metaphor. I
It's
don't
like
know
working at a
what this
place
is.
where you have PTO, but it's frowned upon when you take that PTO. That's also, you throw that in there
Yeah,
too.
right. We have unlimited PTO, but
Right.
like, don't like dip out when we need you, which is every day.
Yeah, or any day
Yeah,
for that matter.
Yeah.
or any
Right.
day. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, just make sure it's your responsibility to make sure all your work is covered.
Even
Okay,
though we don't have someone else
Just
in your position.
dump it on another coworker. Then, okay. So now,
Yeah.
all right. Now, anyways, I don't want to. Don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
crunch
The,
is Sax. Let me ask you this: is crunch ethical? And if not, why is it so common?
I mean, it's not. So it's
Yeah.
like, just to simply answer that question, it's so common because companies feel like they can get what they want out of people. You know what I'm saying? To meet a unrealistic deadline. It's like video game developers and video game publishers. Publishers like, oh, we're gonna get this out by X time. The developers like,
Right.
well, it's not done. It's not. We 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 need it. You know what I'm saying? Like the ads, like the advertisement's already done, the marketing's already done. We need it yesterday. It's kind of like what we did, and like I think it was the worst moments of E3 when they announced that the Sega Saturn was available that day. Could you imagine the anxiety and stress? Like, bro, this is not supposed to come out for a whole nother like month, 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
And my man just said it's available today. What are we supposed to do? And not only does that put a strain on, well, it destroyed Sega as far as consoles are concerned, but also a strain on all of the retailers. Because it's like, yeah, we ain't got it. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, I know what he said, but we ain't got it. It's really not fair. And I used to work in, animal hospital, and I would watch nurses just burn themselves out. You know what I'm saying? I get it, from that standpoint. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like you're dealing with lives and this, that, and the other. So I understand that. But even then, you still need to take care of yourself. And the company needs to be aware. It's like, hey, these are not machines. You know what I mean? Like, these are people. And if everybody in your company decides to say, F you, we're stopping because you're trying to force all of this out of us, they've got to make adjustments.
Yeah.
And then I think people will go along with it. People will know that it's not ethical, but the ones that are being used, to be specific, they will know that it's not right. They will know that it's BS. They will know that this isn't what it should be, but they will do it because of the opportunity that's been presented to them. So they will suck it up, buttercup, and they will work themselves until they pass out.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, and it shouldn't be that way.
And not get paid for it too.
Exactly. That's
the thing that's not people understanding. A lot of these people who are working or doing the crunch and game develop, they're not getting paid overtime.
Nope.
Right.
So the philosophy behind it is, well, you're salaried. So technically, since you're not on an hourly pay rate, you should work whenever I tell you. But no, because that's not how a salary works either. Salary isn't the rate in which I produce. You're paying for a couple things with salary. You're paying 1 for my experience and 2 for my skills. Mm-hmm. You're not paying to have it readily accessible anytime you want.
Right.
Because 1, that's also in an employee agreement. Within most companies, there's something in there that says that you are not contractually obligated to work X amount of hours. And a lot of times it's overlooked. Sometimes it's not. And I think that's why a lot of people are, trying to unionize. And that's why a lot of these companies are afraid of unionizing, because I mean, man, if you're paying someone a salary rate to work, 80 hours of pay period, and you manage to get double out of that, you just got yourself 2 employees in one for half the price.
Right.
So of course they don't want to give that up.
Yeah. Of course. Can we complain about Crunch and Nightmare Sonic at the same time, though, Kev?
Yes, I think we can do it this way. We can do it this way. We can do it in the way that someone fucked up from the beginning by not hiring someone who knew anything about Sonic.
Yeah, they didn't pay the right salary for the
They didn't pay the right salary. Or you know what? No, you know what? Or you know what? I'm not even going to say that. You know who it was? It was the person who knew somebody about Sonic. They had the original design, the one that you saw in the final movie. But I guarantee you, there were so many cooks in the kitchen, so many red tape that someone higher up, some executive who didn't know shit about Sonic, was like, "Well, why doesn't he have teeth? Why doesn't he have 2 separate eyeballs? I don't understand." You know, hedgehogs don't look like that.
Yeah, there's just one designer that's like, you don't want to do this.
Yeah. He's like, dude, this isn't Sonic. But like as I've learned from working, especially as a creative, you make them, whoever the client is, whether it's your boss or actual client, you make them say no to themselves. Unfortunately, this came back on them. But again, I don't think it's on. If I don't think it's not fair to the person that designed it, because I can guarantee you, I'm just going to generalize here that most graphic designers, especially 3D artists, know who the fuck Sonic the Hedgehog is. You know, like these people who the person who did this probably designed Sonic exactly how you saw him, and then someone went back and said, "No, this doesn't look great," and then they put it out there and they shed on it, like, "Oh, can you go back and do the original design?" You know, like,
Yeah.
That
yeah.
phase is probably super frustrating. What about you, Zach? Can we complain about Nightmare Sonic and the situations where we're like, oh, this doesn't look like this, or this doesn't look like that, and be critical of stuff like this while still
Um,
being critical of crunch and the stuff that takes it to get there? I
I
mean, we criticized Cyberpunk for not being ready.
oh god. Oh yeah,
You know,
100%.
so like,
Uh,
is that still fair to complain about that and crunch at the same time?
yeah, I would say so because when you're working somebody like that, it's crazy, and you get like when you do crunch stuff, sometimes you get the end result that is the
Yep.
initial release of Cyberpunk
Yeah.
2077 and Nightmare Sonic because
Yep.
you haven't had enough time to really go over and say, hey, is this flushed out? Is this
Right.
exactly what we need it to be? Is this the product that we want to present? Because if you don't do that, what you run the risk of doing is damaging your reputation, which is all you have as a company. And once that tanks, people are not going to come to you. You're going to start losing revenue. You're going to have to start laying off people. And then you're going to have to eventually shut down because you wanted to be first at the party and you did it and you showed up and you looked like shit. You feel what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's like you can't do that. You know what I'm saying? So it's good to let things take its time. I'm all for people like video game developers coming up and saying, "Hey, I got to push this back. Hey, I got to push this back. Hey, we got to push this back."
Yeah.
I'm good with that because it's like, okay, that means when you drop it, it's going to be right.
Yeah.
Versus
No, and I
giving it
think
trash.
I think yeah, to basically second your point where it's like, yes, we can complain about both because ultimately the complaints are coming one from the delay and one from the finished product. Well, what causes the delay? Well, somebody up top said, you know what, we're probably decided on a deadline or a release date for something that, they didn't even really consult with everybody else or set any type of realistic expectations and then put the burden on them to fit it out. And then we can also complain about the crunch because initially they have to crunch because of that dumb decision you made in the first place. I think it's just it has to come down like I think what helps, I think how we can help it is, these companies, they're going to put out these realistic they're going to try to push, they're going to try and encroach on as many boundaries as they possibly can, right? And boundaries that speaking specifically of their employees. So what we can do is when we see delays, we can not like at least how we can help is not complain. Is that our fault? No, it's not. But it helps the people who are actually doing the work. It helps them out a little bit more because God, man, I would never want to be a game developer. I would probably hate video games, to be honest. Like that shit sounds fucking awful. So I think it's just right because it's like at the end of the day you're the one who has more to lose. You have one, you're being told like you don't have an option. You have to get this shit done. And then two, if it sucks, it falls back on you because you're the one who made it, even though you weren't giving the resources or put in the proper situation to succeed in the first place. Um, so I just think it comes down to, I think as a consumer, I think if we see delays, like I said, just, take a deep breath, just know that this thing's not ready. It's not ready for a good reason. There's a lot going on that a lot of us can't see. It has, there's no reason to pre-order anything anymore. So it's not like you're losing any money. You just got to be a little bit more patient.
Yeah.
So I think, right, because these companies are not going to they're not going to stop setting high expectations. That's just what they do. They're going to try and do it every single time, all the time. And they're going to, I mean, we see this with Amazon. Why do you think you can order a fucking 12 pack of light bulbs and it gets here in 2 hours? That's because they have a history of crunching their employees.
Right.
So that stuff there's no free lunch with this.
Being in flasks.
Yeah.
Great as good. No.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a really balanced opinion on that. I think that there with everything there comes balance, and there with everything you got to think of these things ethically, and that when you're criticizing Nightmare Sonic, like I think there are ways to criticize it that are fair.
Yeah.
But just realize that there is a person behind it that did develop that, and approach that situation with that kind of empathy. As
Yeah.
long as you do that, I think that most rational people are going to make the right decision, you know?
Yeah.
So moving the timeline even further to the most recent Blizzard controversy and back to kind of the sexual harassment situations, you know, and we did discuss this a little bit earlier. People are asking for gamers to not cross the digital picket line and boycott Wizard games. Is this feasible or productive, Sax?
Is it feasible? The honest answer is probably not.
Yeah.
Is it productive in the way of trying to get Blizzard and Activision to take accountability for what they've done or what they have ceased to do or what they refuse to acknowledge and do? Yes, because someone has to try to make them see in a way what you've been doing has been wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like it's so to ask, gamers, hey, don't cross over and stuff like what we were talking about earlier. I already own this. So I'm already across the line here. The
Yeah.
picket the picket fence wasn't up, the picket line wasn't up yet when I had this. It's up now. So I'm looking at Overwatch 2 like, oh man, I really hope you get it together before you come out. I really, really do, because I really want to play you, but I really don't like how you're doing your people right now. And I will choose
Right.
the people over you, Overwatch 2. And that's just where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, one of the big things to think about, people, we talked earlier about how we hate the term cancel culture because it's so demonized. And I think that that's valid. But cancel culture, as it's been demonized, is also a fundamental part of capitalism in general, right? Before, things were getting canceled for, situations like what Activision Blizzard is going through. Before that kind of situation, right? You had people that were getting canceled for, they didn't like the nougat in the Kit Kat bar versus its
Right.
competitor. Like that was
Right.
something that it was getting canceled for. It was losing sales over that. People were not buying it over that. It wasn't anything they said or did. It was something they put in there, And now that has come into something that is, like, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But like, as far as the capitalistic entity of that, it's a critical part of how capitalism works. You have to have these decisions that you make as a consumer. And as I said earlier, you're voting with your dollar and
Right.
you vote more with your dollar than you ever do with a paper ballot.
Right.
And so when situations like this come out, I do think that you have to, as soon as you're cognizant and aware of it, you have to take these into your financial decisions and, decide whether or not you want to, give any of your money towards that. If you make an honest mistake, that's one thing, right? If
Yeah.
you didn't know
Right.
this was supported by Activision Blizzard and all that stuff, and then you went for it, that's one thing. But if you know it and then you're like, but I'm gonna go give them money anyways,
Just willingly
that's when it
turn a
starts to
blind
get,
eye.
yeah, that's when you're being apathetic, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think I think yes, into like I think at today's standard, it's very like there's so many like there's so much overlap with things, right? Like it's very hard to be a responsible, good person, right? Um, but at the end of the day, when you know something and you know that doing something or not doing something could really affect any type of change, whether it's big or small, and you just ignore it and choose not to do it anyway, that automatically makes you complicit.
Right.
Yeah. Kev, when it comes to this issue, though, it seems like it's a very cyclical nature, right? We talked about Gamergate at the beginning here, and this is like Gamergate 2.0, right? Like that's what this is.
Yeah.
Does this recent lawsuit present enough attention to actually change things, or do you think that this may be just another fruitless endeavor like Gamergate was?
No, I don't think so, because this didn't involve the state, right? Like this didn't involve like this a massive lawsuit like that. I think anytime the stakes get this high where there's like actual legal ramifications at play, I think this is bigger than just than this isn't just necessarily a movement anymore. This has become an actual legal issue. So
Yeah,
this is where ultimately where Gamergate was trying to get to, and where it should have been a
yeah,
long time ago. but it's here now, and I think
At least one side of Gamergate.
right. And I think this is going to like hopefully set the precedent going forward and hold a lot more of these companies accountable for, you know, for lack of a better word, just misbehaving.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Sax?
I'm just gonna go ahead and ditto the good old Toddly Awesome there. I'm right there with him. Like when it comes to that, it's yeah, gotta be dealt with. That's where I'm at.
I feel you. Well, that about does it for our deep dive today.